Hello, good evening, bienvenue, good morning, good afternoon, whatever, wherever, whoever you are. Welcome. Full house this evening. I'm going to guess it goes from right to left as you're looking at it, so we've got Stuart, and then we've got a new face with us tonight, Rob Thompson, then the man with incredible lighting sat in the middle there, old Jonathan, Gene, and of course Bruce on the end. So let's leap straight into it because we've got a bit of a full house this evening. Hobby King versus the FCC. Anybody got any thoughts on that? Bruce, you're our electronics man. Tell us your thoughts on that. Oh no, no. Can it be? I see there. We'll go with Bruce first.
Yeah, everybody's got one, haven't they? It's the orange transmitter modules from Hobby King. They sell a lot of stuff. Looks like the FCC is clamping down because there's no FCC certification on this thing, and under the US laws, I think that you have to have FCC certification for anything that transmits. So they have been breaching FCC regulations for quite some time. I'm surprised that some of their competitors haven't dobbed them in earlier and complained about it, but now it looks like the FCC is taking some action. It's going to be interesting. In the response on your site there, Gary, I noticed that Hobby King said they're a small company and they're going to be closing shop soon, which is interesting because they're actually the largest hobby retailer in the world at the moment. Maybe it's just the US division is going to close up because they are based out of China. And they have had a lot of negative criticism recently because of the effects of the new website they put up, which has been, honestly, it's a dog's breakfast. But I think we're going to see the FCC being a lot more proactive in future because they, in theory, have as much teeth as the FAA. And a lot of people flying these drones are not necessarily compliant with FCC regulations, and as more people start using them, it's going to become a bigger problem. But yeah, it'll be interesting to see how this one actually plays out.
Yeah, one of the things I was saying to somebody else was years ago, I did a flying event in the UK, and they made the UK versions of the FCC maybe go to, I had to go to Ofcom, and Ofcom wouldn't accept the model aircraft license that you get with a normal JR transmitter. There's a normal, a bit of paper that allows you to fly. It's gone through the system, and they've been around for years and years and years, those sort of things. The end user doesn't see them anymore, but it used to be a paper license in the UK right up until the 70s. And I had to go to JR in Japan to ask for the full specs of the radio before I was allowed to fly at this particular event. There was a big crowd there, 75,000 people. So that was back in 2010. This has been on the radar for quite a long while. And I wonder if Hobby King are actually closing down the Department of Illegal Radio Transmissions, or whatever they call it. But yeah, it was surprising that he put that, because it wouldn't take much of a Google search to discover the size of Hobby King. Anyone else got any thoughts over this one?
Well, I would say that this is just the tip of the spear for other agencies to come in and start trying to enforce the regulations on the unmanned aircraft area. Prime example of another gorilla in the room that hasn't done much would be the TSA and their alien flight student rules. So when I used to flight instruct, I had to check everybody's birth certificate or passport to make sure they were a US citizen. Otherwise, I couldn't provide them flight instruction. And so now you have how many individuals with Part 107 remote pilot certificates that are out providing individuals how to fly these drones. And so at some point, they're going to realize, well, we should probably try to clamp down on this area and at least get the remote pilot certificate guys to start doing security awareness training, something like that, or at least some type of TSA vetting. At the moment, no one's probably going to care. Once some more high-profile attacks with drones happen, maybe at least on this continent, that'll probably bring a clamp down to it. But going also back to the FCC thing, it seems like nobody really cares about what the FCC has to say, and I know that they have been becoming a little bit more vigilant in trying to investigate these, especially the FPV racers. Now, I know some of them, the wiser ones do not have the overpowered transmitters because it'll step on everyone else, but some of these guys will just, when they want to do like long-range flying, FPV, they'll have those, and I've heard at least one instance where an FCC inspector actually showed up to an FPV racing club and actually was like I believe just issuing warnings to individuals. And so there's just word of mouth relayed to me. So there has been stuff going on quietly behind the scenes with the FCC, and I suspect there'll probably be more happening here, because not only can the people that are flying it without it being certified, the end users, there's also the companies that sell and market this stuff can get in trouble as well, since they're not Part 15 certified to transmit on the right frequencies, that the unlicensed bands, and sometimes over wattage, and depending on if they're analog or digital. So.
Yeah, I think the FPV racing crowd are pretty much getting their sort of can't think of the phrase, getting themselves in order. I think they are. Power, too much power is, and at the end of the day, with the poorly set up radio situation, if you've got a big power output, you just generate heat out the antenna. That's all you're doing. You're not really helping your cause, and that generally is what's happening out there. So I think FPV racing sorting itself out. Long-range radio systems, that's an interesting one. And duty cycles, how long they can be on and off for, that's normally how they're arranged. LoRa is, I'm not quite sure how you say it, but that's the big thing coming, that's low power, long range. So it's very exciting. And I wonder, let's see, if the FCC starts looking hard and finds lots of other companies doing stuff, then it's going to be easy money for them, I think. A bit like the FAA's $1,500 a ticket for each little fine. They're going to line up what they can have, I think.
Well, also worse than that, I believe the FCC regs actually provide for the seizure of the illegal equipment. So now you just paid for a bunch of illegal equipment and then lost it. So not only can you get fined, you can lose your stuff.
Yeah, I don't know how it is in New Zealand, Bruce, but in the UK, the Ofcom has big teeth. I'm guessing the FCC does in the States. Probably your radio regulatory authority over there as well, I should imagine.
Yeah, they can be pretty harsh if they want to be, but I know they have turned up at some FPV racing meetings and checked equipment. But the thing is, fortunately, this part of the hobby is becoming quite mature, and there's no benefits to running high power levels, and there is enough bandwidth available to do what you want to do without breaking the law. The real thing I'm doing also is encouraging more and more people in the hobby to become ham radio operators, because it gives you a much greater choice of frequencies over which you can operate and power levels. So not only is it fun and interesting, but it also covers your ass if you're using gear that may not be legal otherwise.
Yeah, the World Radio Council for years has been talking about putting everything above 6 gigs for C2 and video and data links in RPA, and having protected spectrum up there. So I can imagine when that eventually does shake down in whatever year, then suddenly everybody will be changing their gear that's flying quote-unquote drones, and the model aircraft guys will stay down in the protected spectrum of 2.4 and 72 or whatever else your local countries are, frequencies are. I see you've been joined by Philip and Rory, both in also in the Southern Hemisphere. In fact, it's a Southern Hemisphere win, I think. I think we're beating the Northern Hemisphere at the moment. That's unusual, isn't it? Good evening, Philip. Can you hear me over?
I can. G'day.
Oh, there you go. You just proved it. Excellent. Excellent. Now, Philip, I asked you on because completely out of the blue, I had a parcel arrive, and here was this parcel, and in this parcel, there's all sorts of, wiggly wires and GPS and things, and apparently these are going to make my life better. I'm wondering, explain to me how exactly they're going to make my life better.
Okay. Well, I suppose the first thing, because they look cool, that's always they've got flashy lights on them.
Well, there we are then. Just jumping enough said.
Yeah, so you've got a normal GPS there, and you've got a RTK base and an RTK rover. So basically, the RTK base connects to your mission planner, and it sends up corrections up to your aircraft. And the RTK sits in your aircraft and gives you centimetre accurate positioning, theoretically.
And that's using, and these will be attached to the Pixhawk 2.1. And you, sir, are the designer of the Pixhawk 2.1.
No, apparently that's my fault. Yeah.
But you are to blame, and
I'm
that
to blame.
comes with all sorts of other benefits. That has
So-
redundant sensors, and we can have the dual GPS and all that sort of
Yeah.
thing. And there you go. Look at that. I think the way you fitted it to that aircraft
you
is
like
superb.
that? Yeah,
It's got to
really,
work very
it's
well.
really good.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. That's probably a NASA approved.
Oh yeah, definitely. Unfortunately, I've managed to get myself in a situation where I actually don't have a full kit myself. They were a little bit too popular in the first batch, and I dipped out, which is a bit of a pain. So that one's one of the early prototypes, but hopefully I won't miss out on the next batch.
And I see that you have two controversial aircraft sat right behind you. You designed, of course, the autopilot for the Solar as well, which is the early versions of 2, and you've got the
I'm
car.
sorry.
Oh,
What
sorry.
was that?
Oh,
What was that?
oh,
Yeah,
I
sorry.
see. There's a 50% reduction in controversial aircraft sat behind you.
Unfortunately, my NDAs on that one are thick.
Blast! I wish I should have asked you about that one first. So tell me about the Karma you just put on the floor.
Yeah. I had a good fly of it actually over in New Zealand. Actually did some filming of my daughter, not last weekend, but the weekend before, over in Hamilton. And I must say, when it comes to regs, I love the New Zealand method of applying for a method of flying. I thought that was just so straightforward. Log on to the website and register everything, say where you're going to be, which airports you're too close to, etc., etc. It tells you who to ring up. You ring up the appropriate airport, and they say, "Yeah, no problem," and you go flying. It was the most straightforward process. Yeah, easier than anywhere else in the world, I think. But the Karma, it flew all right. Quite happy with that, and yeah.
So what
Obviously,
was
there's
it
a few
then?
little bugs that need to be ironed out, but other than that, it's all good.
Was it the battery or was it the gimbal? Come on, which is it?
No,
Don't worry.
I'll move
Plead the fifth. Plead the fifth.
I did that
whatever.
plenty at high school. It worked very well with my school principal, pleading the fifth.
Very good. So let's quickly go run me through the benefits of the Pixhawk 2.1. Why do I want one of those rather than anything else at the moment?
Well, I think first one would be availability. Obviously, Pixhawk 1 is not in production by 3D Robotics anymore. They've moved on in their process of what they do and how their company runs, which is okay. So as a community, we have continued. The ArduPilot team has continued, and all development is moving on without their assistance. Ironically, since we haven't had as much financial assistance, we've actually got more done, which is I'm not quite sure how that worked, but anyway.
Hunger.
Hunger and passion do tend to come into it. So the team has become a lot more unified and a lot more passionate about what we're all about, making sure that people can fly and people can build the best vehicles possible. And trying to still keep that at a reasonable price. So we partnered up with one of the actual distributors from 3D Robotics, a company called Hex Technology over in China. They were a bit of an unusual company in as far as they actually imported the made in Mexico Pixhawk 1s into China and sold them there. So a bit of the reverse path to normal. So I've actually known them for quite a long time, and when they could no longer get Pixhawk 1s, they approached me and said, can we build the Pixhawk 2? And at that time, we'd exhausted all options of convincing 3DR to do it. So, yeah, we started that up in about February this year. For a product that I was ready to take to market in 2014, it's taken to market, but we're there. The benefits. The biggest one to me is the modularity. Depending on what you want to do with the thing, it can be very flexible. So it comes in a cube format, if I can find my camera. So this is the actual Pixhawk 2. We call this the cube. and that's the complete flight control, everything. And then underneath it has a single DF17 connector that can connect to any sort of carrier board you want. So whether it's a familiar drone that obviously I had that in previously, it can plug into that directly, or whether it's a custom drone with a carrier board, and the carrier boards can be flexible. So the one that we're selling to start with is bells and whistles, does everything. You can plug an Edison in the bottom and have co-computing. It's got every pin out that Pixhawk 1 had, plus a few more. And, or you could go down to one that's more suited to a smaller aircraft that just has, enough pins to just get yourself by. So we're actually selling the little power module that plugs onto the bottom of that. That gives you your redundant power, so that people could actually build their own little boards if they wanted to suit their own airframes. We've released the drawings of this under a really permissive license. It's CC0, which means public domain, which means basically there is no license. You can do what you want with it. You don't have to tell anyone if you don't want to. So if you want to put it into a proprietary product, you can. So it's a really, really permissive license on the carrier board to encourage people, because really a carrier board is just a wiring loop. It's just put down on copper to make it a bit easy. So, yeah, so, and obviously the GPS as well. So we've got the dual GPS on there. Obviously you can do that on Pixhawk 1, so that's not really a thing.
Yeah. Oh, no. I don't know who's having the emergency now.
Someone's having a car alarm.
Someone's car's been
Gene just disappeared.
Gene's car's just gone from the garage. There you go. So, of course, I can't believe anybody that's watching this doesn't know what ArduPilot is, but basically the Ardu project. But basically, you can fly stuff, drive stuff, and float stuff. I haven't made a way of making a better phrase for that. And sync stuff. Of course, you can sync stuff now as well.
Now, so yes. Yep.
Yeah, so pretty much any autonomous vehicle could be driven with code contributed by various team members that are specialists in whatever that particular area is. And it potentially, or quite possibly, is the world's most popular autopilot now, I think. And I say that because it's in an awful lot of Chinese clone things that will follow you around for...
understatement.
Yeah, it's goodness knows how many aircraft are out there flying with it now. So it's been a fantastic success, and I wish you every success with the 2.1, and I hope it goes from strength to strength. I'm sure it will. So you're on to the second batch now. Yeah,
we're just trying to finalise the second batch. We're just in the process. We're actually going to do 2 different versions of the carrier board this time. We're going to do the one you can put the Edison in and the one without, because there's a bunch of people who won't really care about co-computing, and some people will just, go head over heels for co-computing. So, so we want to sort of cover all of those bases. And the first image for the Edison came out last night. Jaime from down in Mexico just released that, which is really cool. We got people talking about doing... I don't think we can use it. I think we can call them clever shots that might mimic a particular drone's abilities, which would be really, really, really nice if you add RTK when you start getting, centimeter level X, Y, and Z motion on a multi-point cable cam, things like that.
What about terrain following? Any thoughts on terrain following?
Well, terrain following's sort of been an existing feature of ArduPilot for quite a long time. So we've got the ability to put the worldwide terrain maps into the SD card on ArduPilot, so you can fly anywhere and have a good idea what the terrain is. You still want to have a reference of some sort as to what you're doing, whether it's like that one's a pulse LiDAR. Obviously, if you want better ones, there's Lightwear. We've got all sorts of cool toys from them. Depending on what your application is picking the right LiDAR for that job. Yeah.
You've got the winning desk, I think, at the moment to be able to pull a LiDAR out and a pulse signal.
Yeah,
What do you reckon?
I was looking around to see what I could. You know, I've got
I've got no shortage of toys here.
Device right here.
I played with a laser cutter this week. Does that count for anything?
Oh, that counts. That's cool.
Yeah.
I've got a hole through that finger from a laser cutter. So, yeah.
Funny enough, the bloke who I was playing with the laser cutter with did exactly the same thing. He said, "It's a brand new thing." He said, "Is this hot down here?" Oh, yes, it is.
So Philip, I think probably one of the more important questions is how do we get a hold of one of these little jewels that you have there in your hand?
Yeah.
I mean, the Pixhawk too.
Yeah. Well, there's distributors all over the world. We've covered most countries, and yeah, basically, if you go to proficnc.com, there's a stores tab there, and you can find a distributor that's near you. We actually don't want people buying off my store. I'm not set up to do that, and we don't want the factory delivering individually. We want to actually encourage a network of distributors again. That was something that was a real strength of the APM days back in the early days of APM, was all these distributors who actually got involved and could help people and gave advice and could make a little bit of money from the hardware. So we want to get right back into that model as well. So yeah, definitely please support your local distributor. Don't buy it online. So.
Or buy it online from your local distributor, of course.
Or buy it online from your local distributor. Just don't buy it online from, someone who's not local. Yeah.
So if you've got any questions, because Gene obviously does the rescue aircraft. You were in wildfires yesterday. Have you got any questions about the autopilots and their uses in your aircraft, Gene?
Well, I mean, one of the things that we have to deal with in the field is the things have got to be pretty rugged. And you know what has happened, with the connector issue and all that on one. And we've been certainly concerned about that. And of course, there is some talk about the open source code being a little unsecured, if you will, for
that's actually. Yeah, that's actually a really interesting question. We get that question on a regular basis. I actually had a long discussion with some various people in the Australian Air Force on that topic, where they were wanting, drones to end up with a higher level of certification. And one of his team members had to tap him on the shoulder and explain to him that actually all of their research drones were using ArduPilot, and he wasn't actually aware of that. So that was quite interesting. As far as the connectors, we've moved to a JST. Let's see if this thing will focus.
They're much better. They're just much better.
Yeah, and basically they have a locking mechanism on them that you pull down and it comes out, as opposed to you yank on them and the wires come out. So that's improved dramatically. So that's probably one of the big ones. On the
what about temperature?
Temperature. Well,
extreme.
Yeah, I suppose I didn't mention that one. So the insides of the cube are this little beastie. This is the IMU. Well, two of the IMUs. There's actually 3 IMUs on board. One of them is fixed, and the idea of the fixed one is basically if something goes wrong with this, it is a mechanically loose part. So if something did go wrong, it became dislodged, or no longer gave useful information, you could still fly home on the fixed one. This is actually also heated. So we keep this sitting at a nice toasty 60 degrees Celsius, and that keeps things consistent. So yeah, nice and hot. So while everyone else is trying to cool their electronics, we're cooking them.
So why going up to 60 C? It does sort of seem counterintuitive, that.
Yeah, 60 is the reason is about controlling delta temperatures. So in our normal situation, we start at say 20 degrees outside, or if you're in Canada at the moment, minus 20 degrees. Obviously, talking Celsius here, but you might then fire the thing up, the processor warms up, and the insides of the case all of a sudden end up at somewhere around 30 degrees Celsius. If you start at -20, you've got a 50-degree temperature difference. Now, gyros and accelerometers all have a offset due to temperature. So as you start flying, things will start getting inaccurate. So that can be as little as just giving you a slightly false inertial position, which matters when you're doing mapping, or it could be as extreme as, flyaway stuff. So obviously keeping those deltas tight is really good. So we looked at your average Australian pilot, and we've got people who are flying down in Arizona where it gets stinking hot, and we sort of, we've got people that are flying in Canada. So we've got quite a range of people on our development team that we can actually find where the extremes are. So basically, if you're flying on a day that ends up with the internal temperature of your aircraft sitting somewhere around 80 degrees Celsius, if you're sitting at 60 to start with, your temperature delta is now 20. And that's about worst case scenario. If you're getting more than about 80 degrees Celsius, you should not be flying for your own health, because the sun's probably beaten down pretty hard. So that's sort of where the limits sort of come out. Also, a well-designed aircraft should have a little bit of airflow coming through, hopefully over the ArduPilot. So the actual case is aluminium as well, which helps with a bit of heat dissipation when you do get up there. So so 60 was that temperature that ambient shouldn't be causing us too much trouble, and it reduces the delta for those extremes when it is above that.
What about vibration?
Answers that question.
How much power is being used to create the heat?
About 150 milliamps. So it is quite a chunky amount of your power system actually goes to the heat. Obviously, that's only during heat up because it's in a little insulated box. So the heat is only on when it needs to be on. Yep.
So it's an insulated box, but it's an aluminium case.
It is. It's a sort of a fine balance of getting the right amount of heat out versus keeping the right amount of heat in, which I hope we have that balance correct, and I'm sure we'll find out. So, one of the things you can do if you are operating in Texas or Arizona or something like that is you can actually attach. That is aluminium, so it is machinable. You could attach a fan or do whatever you need to do if you are in those environments where it needs to be cooler.
What about vibration resistance? We've encountered some problems with sensors getting saturated, and even with the one, some of the poor quality sensors that we ran into, they would sat out and off it would go.
Yeah, it's a really serious issue. I mean, just to put it into perspective, if you've got a 16G sensor, the Z-axis is your worst one, because your Z-axis is normally sitting at 1G, which means you've actually got 15G up and 17G down. So if you now have a 16G vibration, you're going to saturate at the top and you're not going to saturate at the bottom, which will mean you end up with a bias that makes the copter think that it's falling. So the copter will then respond. And that response means it goes up. There was actually a solo at Fort Worth that had a little bit of a bug like that, and we lost contact at 7,000 feet, and we don't know where that went. But there's still a reward of $400 going for anyone who returns that copter, and there's a search area online. We'd love to see the logs of that one. But the beauty with Solo, fortunately, is because it live streams its raw logs to the transmitter, we actually had the logs up until the point we lost transmission. And so Paul Riseborough was able to diagnose what the problem was with the EKF, and he's put a whole bunch of protection into the EKF to actually look at the barrows in situations like that. And when the barrow says that it's still only at when the barrow says it's at 7,000, but the estimated altitude is at 21 feet, it now knows there's a problem and it needs to land. So whenever we do have an incident where something does go horribly wrong, the advantage we have with ArduPilot is we have a very big team that can look at these logs, and we have hundreds of thousands of logs available to us to actually diagnose these things. So that whole testing phase of the release candidates and people testing the beta, that gives us really, really good data that we can actually analyze and remove these issues. I'll go back to your original question of, open source and security. That's actually a quite a topical one at the moment. There are plenty of non-open source autopilots out there. And from a security point of view, the question has to be, what evidence do you have that autopilot is secure? What evidence do you have that someone can't do something malicious? And what evidence do you have that an update isn't actually going to make your system worse? The beauty with the open source system is you can actually, either yourself or hire someone who knows what they're looking at, go through the code and actually verify that every line of code that you are flying is exactly what you expect to be flying. So for critical applications, you might decide you don't want to actually download your firmware from the pre-compiled thing. You actually compile it yourself and verify exactly which lines of code are going into your vehicle. That becomes pretty important when you're flying over critical infrastructure, and you want to make sure that the drone is not doing something unexpected as has happened with others.
Philip, I got to tell you, most public safety agencies don't have a plethora of programmers that will go through line by line and look at the code. They have to trust, a third party or something like that. And as a longtime program and hack myself, I've put in plenty of back doors and little secret passages and that sort of thing that makes my life easier as a programmer, which ends up being a vulnerability.
Yep.
So
yeah, I think the same thing. You've got the ability that people like yourself can actually look at that, and if something did show up, I'm pretty sure that we have various people that look at our code quite intently for that sort of stuff that would be publishing it very quickly if they found it. So the fact that it's there and anyone can look at it can give you that sort of confidence, which you can't get with any other autopilot that's a lockdown system.
Yeah, and I was sort of an example I was going to come to, not so much with security, but just for stupidity within lockdown system, is the air environment having only like 4 command and control frequencies, and the guys, if they snap in a battery, they stay away from the propellers because they don't know if the thing's going to run up, because someone just over that next little sandy hill then they don't know is operating on the same command and control frequency, so the thing can be off by itself and they shoot themselves down all day. So there's all sorts of other, apart from the serious security that people worry about, there's all sorts of other things hanging off command control and unmanned aircraft and all that sort of thing. You could go around forever. Perhaps this plays back, before you came on, we were speaking to the FCC and Hobby King topic, and if agencies want to find an excuse to cause trouble, then they'll cause trouble, and that might be one of them. There's many ways to cause trouble in our industry, I think. And it's in similarly on the vein of causing trouble. Bruce wishes to cause trouble amongst the pigeon fancying community and wants them gone. And I find that quite a controversial viewpoint, Bruce. Perhaps you'd like to explain.
Well, no, I don't want the pigeon fanciers gone. I mean, it's interesting because I'm doing a document up for our regulators to try and make them wake up to the fact they shouldn't be regulating children's toys or a hobby that's never been a problem. One of the things I encountered was that pigeons have featured in bird strike statistics over the years. And at Brisbane Airport not so long ago, a flock of racing pigeons had a bit of an encounter with a jet-powered aircraft and caused quite a bit of damage. And I'm thinking, well, we've got all these reported instances of pigeons aircraft, so they're obviously a threat, a danger. Yet we don't regulate the people who breed these pigeons and race them. On the other hand, we've got a model hobby community flying recreational drones who have never had an encounter with a full-size aircraft and never caused that sort of problem, and they're regulated to hell and back. So why do we have this massive sort of difference between your pigeon breeders? Oh, they call themselves fanciers. I don't know why that sounds a bit shaky. I don't know what they do when they're not racing, but they've got the pigeon fanciers. They can do whatever the hell they like with their birds, and they cause injuries, or not injuries, but they cause damage to aircraft. We've got people who fly toys and models as a hobby. They're regulated to hell, yet they've caused no problems at all. So I'm going to bring this in and say, please explain.
Yeah, Rob, you're sat there quietly being very polite. You're very much a man of regulations as well. Have you got an opinion of pigeons, Rob?
Yeah, it's kind of hard to regulate wildlife. Plus, with a person attached to some kind of vehicle, then they're ultimately the responsibility. And, here, touching back on the FCC thing, if really you don't have any money, the government's not going to come after you, but they'll put you out of business. So I believe, Hobby King's taking a safe route there and closing up shop. I just talked with my FCC specialist, and they told me that there's nothing more than a couple $1,000s couldn't have taken care of. So that seems like a shame to put someone out of business like that. I mean, now they've got the fines. Who knows how much those fines will be? I suspect six-figure dollar amounts. But there's been
right. It's not expensive to do that testing, Rob. I mean, I looked up. It's really easy. There's all sorts of testing centers all over the place. So I'm just kind of wondering, like, why didn't Hobby King do that or make sure of that? I think it's kind of like going back to that hobbyist, do-it-yourself mentality. Like, I'm a lawyer, I'm an FCC specialist, I'm a medical doctor, right?
You might very well be, Jonathan. That wouldn't surprise me if you were all those things rolled up into one.
Well, it was Spectrum being upset because this orange equipment is a lot cheaper, and I think it performs better. So if I was a competitor and someone was selling stuff illegally, that's a good way to put them out of business. Or let's say it was another online distributor. Let's say Horizon Hobby gave the call.
Yeah,
it's not that difficult to figure out.
No, and I think just about all of us here probably own that orange gear. I certainly do, and I think we all use it. So it's definitely must be better.
Look, it's actually an interesting topic because obviously the clone topic comes up on a regular basis that I'm right in the middle of. My stuff gets cloned on a regular basis, so I'm thoroughly used to it, and. It is difficult from the point of view of a manufacturer to put out a design, put all the R&D into it, put all the effort into it, and have someone go and undercut you. It used to be one of those things that it was really expensive to actually get into these markets. And so therefore you put a product out there, you're pretty secure, you're going to get a couple of years out of it before someone comes out with something similar. And it would be similar, it wouldn't be identical. Whereas now we are in a different world where you put a design out there, whether it's open source, whether it's closed source, doesn't appear to matter. There will be a copy of it just as quickly, whether you give them the designs or not. So I do understand the motivation of other companies that, if that's what's happened here, I do understand that. But at the same time, going back to that certification side of things, certification's not easy. It is really expensive, and the margins on this stuff are really low. To give you an idea, the Pixhawk 2, the margin for the manufacturer on that is about $9. So they've got to sell a hell of a lot of Pixhawk 2s before they make enough money back to, go and do special things. And that's exactly why we haven't actually bothered with a telemetry radio. We're telling people to buy things like the RFD900 and stuff like that, because we just don't want to get into that messy area of in Australia, ACMA and FCC and all that sort of stuff. So, whereas Hobby King have obviously made different choices, and I wish them the best in trying to sort out this mess at the moment. But do understand the other side of the fence as well if that's what's happened.
Absolutely. Rory in Sydney, are you on your bicycle or are you listening out? To see if his microphone goes. He's on his bicycle, probably.
I am listening.
He's listening out.
Not on a bicycle.
You're not on your bicycle. Excellent. Rory?
I'm about to be.
Yeah, you're about to be, are you? Okay. I think you're traveling to Patrick's not on, obviously, tonight, but you're traveling to San Francisco next week or very soon, I think.
Today, actually.
Oh, yeah. Today? Oh,
that's right. For the DJI conference.
That's right. Well, your man sent me a press release about it, so I guess we can talk about it now.
Yeah, that's right. So, look, we're actually going to try and hijack a bunch of the dealers and customers that'll be in town for that show, and we want to do a bit of a demonstration of our aero points just in the Cesar Chavez Park in San Francisco, and kind of run everybody through the workflow there. So Just a little plug at the start here. It'd be great for anyone listening, if you're in town in San Francisco on Thursday and Friday, and actually Saturday this week, come and have a look at the ArrowPoints work.
And this is the DJI event that's been bubbling under for a little while, and of course hasn't attracted huge attention because it didn't involve an Inspire, a Mavic, or a Phantom. Obviously, you can't tell us exactly what's going to be happening, but it strikes me it's perhaps going to be a little more commercially orientated, this event.
Yeah, look, I think there's actually some information out now. I'm not sure exactly DJI's strategy around talking about this thing. It seems to be in between public and private knowledge, and unusual for a few parties involved. But yeah, I think it is going to be commercially focused. There's a few streams running, public safety, infrastructure, mapping and surveying, and maybe inspections, and talking a lot about some of the interesting and common sort of commercial drone applications.
Now, I've been playing and struggling, and I'm going to ask you, you're a mapping man, I'm going to ask you about this. I'm going to put up an image as well. I have been struggling at trying to get one of them. Gene, I don't know if you've tried to do this. I've been struggling at row counting, and it's made me wonder just how accurate these pseudo NDVI images are that the people are selling out there. Not selling quite, but providing. A Drone Deploy has one. Everyone has them. What's your thoughts on this sort of thing? I noticed Propeller Aero's not big into agriculture.
No, that's right. I actually don't have any opinions on this whatsoever. We intentionally steer clear of ag. We think that probably under threat from satellites mostly. There's a bit of a bigger. I mean, I think satellites are a more convenient way to capture this data, especially when you're looking at broadacre work rather than the a high accuracy, high precision, high or low GSD precision agriculture where you've got high value crops. So for us, we think that, as you said, there are many good solutions out there, and we're not going to pursue that. So we often direct people to Drone Deploy or Data Mapper, or any other guys' plant ranges if they're looking for that sort of work from us.
Well, that's exactly the ones. Sorry, that's exactly the two that I'm using. But Gene, you've been flying and mapping wildfires today, and you before we started, you needed extra tools for that sort of thing. What tools are you using when you're flying, Gene? He's not listening. He's not there, or the bandwidth's gone.
He froze.
He's frozen, isn't he? Yeah, that's.
He's doing one of those things that you see those sidewalk people do. They're like, oh, and then he's gonna
doing the mannequin challenge.
Dance. All right, we can send him some donations. What's his email address? I'll send him a PayPal for a donation.
You made him go. Look at that. You scared him off. Oh well, I was gonna. I know I know the problem he's been having today. He's been trying to map wildfires, and he's trying to get the acreage and do other sorts of things, trying to lead him into that conversation, but that wasn't going to happen. So I can put my hands up and say today, I flew into a tree. Yes, a tree jumped out and caught me today. I worried about the tree just down the road, and I walked and I watched it go past, and I patted myself on the back with my excellent flight planning, because to my naked eye, the next tree was much shorter, and I had 4 shots to go, and it flew straight into the next tree. So that was fun. I had a chap up on a pole and all that sort of thing. So that's why currently terrain following and detect, collision and avoid is very much top of mind for me at the moment. So I don't have to call out a guy with a ladder again. So I'm struggling to get these products for counting stuff to work and all that sort of thing. It doesn't seem as out of the box as everybody claims, and yeah, it'll be interesting when we come out with the results of that. So I can take the Stu. You can rib away now. You say what you like.
No, welcome to my world.
Yeah. I think if you're not crashing, you're not trying hard enough. I think. Well, that's something else, isn't it? Oh dear. So
all I would say is it just made me feel so much better after my little scurry last week.
Yes. Mr. Ruprecht, has anything caught your keen legal mind this week other than the FCC?
Oh, no, I was just thinking about the whole crashing thing, how it seems to happen to everybody. There's the first time you go fly an aircraft, then it's a drone, I would say.
That's the problem.
Right, you go fly the drone the first time, and you're like, wow, that was awesome, because you're super scared something's going to happen, so you're super safe. And then for some reason, the second flight, you know, when you walk out of your house, all of a sudden you start hearing that like electric guitar to like Top Gun, you know, and then all of a sudden, you know, when you get out to the field, you start hearing like Highway to Danger, and then you start thinking you're Top Gun, and you start doing your fighter moves, and next thing you know, bam, no more drone.
You know what? You say that. That's very, very true. That, I mean, years ago, one very wise man gave me some very wise words when I got my commercial pilot's license. And he said, you won't have an accident with your first 150, 200 hours. You remember this conversation, Gary? He said,
I do, yeah.
When you get into your 500 or 600, that's when you're at risk, because now you become a bit ballsy now, you know? And it's very, very true. And I think the same could be applied for drone flying as well, you know?
Right.
Yeah, so
absolutely.
we'll confess I had my first full-size bingle, and it was 12 years after I first got my pilot's license, and bent a nose gear. It was very embarrassing, and thankfully only embarrassing. A little bit expensive, but yeah, that boldness that comes is dangerous.
Well, funny enough, there was a little graphic amongst the Facebook groups, and they were putting that average at 150 hours. And I've said in a couple of places, I think that's way too early. I think you're very cautious. I do think 500 hours is a pretty dangerous place to be, and complacency will get you every time if you're not careful. But yeah, no, that was me today. I thought I was home in time for tea and medals because I thought I'd missed that tree, but no, I didn't. But also, I tell you what else it was on my part. It was poor flight planning. I went to use the Precision Hawk app for whatever it's called, data drone thing. Got to the field and it didn't work, so I quickly used another app, and so I had already started down the accident chain by just changing what I was doing. I'd already put one of the bricks in place for an incident or accident.
Oh, Gary, it wasn't commercial pressure, was it, Manny?
Well, thankfully, I wasn't earning any money, so it wasn't commercial pressure. But it was time. It was a set time, isn't it? Want to get on, want to get this done and that done. So it's a similar sort of thing to commercial pressure. Money doesn't have.
Yeah, and that was exactly the mistake I made. I was against the clock, you know, rushing.
Yeah.
Well, in aviation in general, we have human factors, and you know, human factors training is a integral part of full-size aviation, and you know, it's possibly something that we should be considering for drones, and just, you know, the pressure of your mates wanting you to show a particular move when you know you shouldn't. Yeah.
Now you've fallen into my trap very nicely there. Tell me about jet-powered full-size aviation. Do you know anything about jet-powered full-size aviation, Philip?
We're doing up a Harrier jump jet at the moment, so yeah, we got to test run the engine a couple of weeks ago, which was good fun. Yeah, so a friend of mine who owns a commercial UAV design company bought it on eBay, and we're trying to get it ready for the Australian International Air Show in March. So yeah, VTOL.
I have to ask, how much does a Harrier cost on eBay?
More than I can justify, and I don't think that's allowed to be public.
Okay,
no, that's fine. Wife would think.
Fine. Oh, well, fair enough. I mean, yes, we must all bow about the highest authority in the land.
Yes,
absolutely.
And the fact that we just bought a brand new engine for it and a few other things like that might also not go down well.
Where do brand new engines? Is it harrierworld.com or something like that? Where does one get it?
Jet Art Aviation is one of the places, and basically, yeah, there's hangars full of gear left over from the fact that the Brits canned them all. So yeah,
you want to come to Liverpool,
pretty cool.
You can get anything in Liverpool, anything.
Well, we need some sidewinders. It's just not finished without the sidewinders. Can you grab us some of them?
I know.
You must just go and look in the. You must go and look in the fields around, because we were forever letting them. They were forever sliding off the rail, going backwards as we took off. So just look in the fields around there. There's loads of them. Loads of them. Get them everywhere.
Tell you off subject. I know a guy actually. He's got a load of MiGs, and he bought them in the 80s, and they're all parked up now down at Harden, which is the British Aerospace factory in Chester. There's about 4 or 5 MiGs just parked around the back. And in fact, when they came into the docks in Liverpool, there was a good old Scouse docker, and he decided to have a sit, press some bloody buttons. He wanted to kill himself by pressing the ejector seat, which was still live. True story.
Not good. Not good.
I guess the ejector seat in yours is completely inert.
It is. Where that's one of the unfortunate things about this aircraft. It will be flight ready, but without an ejector seat on a Harrier, we haven't found a pilot silly enough to volunteer to fly the thing. They don't glide. They rely very much on the engine to stay in the air. That's not true. They do glide, but they glide at such a rate that if you do hit the ground, you are not walking away. So, unfortunately, this thing will be able to do ground runs. We might be able to do a tethered hop, but it won't be going great distances, unfortunately.
Is it a single seat or a 2-seat?
That's a 2-seat. So it's the T4 trainer.
T4, yeah.
So, yeah, so there's actually a identical one flying over in the US. There's a guy in the US has got one that he does Joe flights in and stuff like that. So it is quite a cool aeroplane.
And are you hoping to put ArduPilot on board it?
I may be tempted. Look, if it was my aircraft, I would definitely be doing that. Unfortunately, it isn't my aircraft, so. Yes, at this point, the original flight computer is in it. 1964 build gyro stabilization system. It is only rate stabilized, so really it comes down to the pilot. There's no tuning on this thing. It's factory tuned. So, and unfortunately, we are missing a cable between gyro 1 and gyro 2. There's no yaw gyro on it, so yaw stabilization is purely by the pilot's inner ear. And if you get more than 7 degrees onto an angle when you're in ground effect, that's game over. So the thrust ends up heading under the aircraft, under the other wing, and over you go. So for a system that's that touchy, it's got some pretty ancient gear holding it up, and that ancient gear was very, very, very reliable. So some of it does put our current technology a little bit to shame. In reality, we've made things smaller, but we haven't necessarily made them better. So
it was an amazing machine, wasn't it? I know what else I wanted to talk about. I don't know, did everyone see the chaps landing quadcopters on moving vehicles, moving at 50 kilometers an hour? I thought that was quite a cool story. Anyone see that? Thoughts on that?
That's easy. We've been doing that for years.
No, landing on them, Gene, not crashing on them, landing on them. It's a different thing, Gene. You've got to be able to use it again, Gene. If you can use it again, it's okay.
Semantic.
People have been doing that on boats for quite a long time, recovering on moving boats. A vehicle in some ways is easier than a boat because you're not pitching up and down and rolling side to side. You're only moving, normally in one direction. Unless the driver's really bad. But.
Well, I thought it was interesting for any new use people try to bolt onto drone delivery, and I thought it might be useful in that in some way or form. Oh, what was that? Where was that come from? That's an extra.
Sometimes dispatch comes over very loud on my radio. Sorry, that was my dispatch radio.
Gene lives in a big box store. He's over on aisle 12. You don't know
that. Gene, a mop to the pickle aisle, a mop to the pickle aisle, Gene. Clean up on the pickle aisle. There he's gone. He's gone.
I hurt his feelings again.
This is you every time.
You're a bully, Gary.
There you go. Look, a big yellow radio. So how often you dispatch from that then, Gene?
More times than I'd care to count. It does impact business a little bit.
Wow. And what are you on standby? So what's your, this is unthought about, what's your go kit? What have you got ready? If somebody calls you now, what have you got ready to go with?
We have 2 Inspires with FLIR, and we have 2 Spectras with high-res cameras, and a different autopilot than the Pixhawk 2, but we could remedy that later on. And
then what would your flight planning procedure be for that? Because obviously you don't know where you're going or what's going to happen. When you're driving there, is there somebody driving and somebody sorting out the flight? How does that work?
Well, typically we operate under exigent circumstances anyway. So we can kind of take control of the airspace if we have to. But we try to fly it under Part 107 or 333. So, yeah, we do the whole, we check the airspace. We do make sure we're all good to go and there's no warnings and that sort of thing. But, yeah, if we need to, we'll call TFR just as quickly as we can.
Just as quickly as they do over Indian reservations?
Pretty much. Pretty much.
What did I say? What did I say? What did I say? What was it? What did I say? What did I say? Any thoughts on that, Mr. Ruprecht?
Not publicly.
Oh dear, that's not. You're fighting the cause, aren't you? You're in there for the little man all the way, Jonathan.
I can neither confirm nor deny with that express permission from the Secretary of State. So.
But all right. Well, we can. We didn't script to talk about this, but they have been shooting at them. Is that a good or a bad thing?
That's a bad thing, especially if you own the drone. If it was Rob's drone, I mean, it would be funny. But so.
Actually, if it's your drone, it's great publicity. Like being the first serious commercial drone shot down. I mean, that's free publicity.
I think they've had 2 down, haven't they? Now,
I believe it's 5. Last I heard.
5. Wow. And
yeah.
Where does that? So it's in a TFR. So does that mean that those law enforcement officers can do that? Does that give them the right to shoot stuff down in TFR?
That's an interesting discussion that hasn't been fully clarified because that type of TFR is a 91-137A subsection 2, which is a complete prohibition on any type of flying. So what's really interesting there, though, is like what was the justification for that 137A2? I mean, A1, those are actually rarely given out because it's prohibiting people from entering that airspace. While with other ones like the A2 version, I believe you can get in if you're accredited news and stuff. So that's what it just seems very overly burdensome, and like they're trying to hide something because are other TFRs that will allow accredited news crews to come in. So it's interesting that one was picked compared to the other ones.
The TFR doesn't allow you to shoot it down though. That's interfering with local obstruction of justice. So the sheriffs that are there can shoot down any drone that flies over that they feel deemed as a threat, whether they're taking video or whatever they're doing.
So how's this gonna? Is this only a story in our world because it's our world and we care about that sort of thing, or is this TFR a story in the States? Is it getting attention that a government agency might be overstretching its rights, responsibilities, and duties? Anyone?
Not my line of work. I'm not going to answer that, though.
Look, I think the important question there is, are they shooting down the pigeons?
Yes.
Well, yeah, I mean, there's an interesting discussion here of how I would just say that when the FAA wants to do things one way, and then they do things a different way, and how they actually treat the droners. Okay, so that's kind of creating some weird, a weird dichotomy there. So with manned aircraft, if you were to shoot down a manned aircraft, the whole entire world would go completely psycho. But if you shoot down a drone, then not really. There's not as much buzz about it, mostly from the droner side. Then they say, hey, droners, you guys are, if you get a 107 remote pilot certificate, you're now a pilot. Therefore, you should act like one and be professional like one. And at the same time, they go, well, why should we when we get treated so poorly by the FAA? The drones can get shot down. Not just stepping away from the situation happening with the TFR, because I mean that's a very hot topic issue with the pipeline and stuff. So just kind of like pull away from that. There are other people that are commercially operating who aren't trying to protest something or flying their aircraft in a very aggressive manner. As you know, if you look at one of the videos that was posted online, it did appear that the individual who was flying over the police was in a more provocative way trying to incite something with the police. And so just kind of stepping back from that, Seven guy is out doing real estate photography and his drone is shot down, which that has happened quite, you know, it is here and there, it is happening. Why isn't the FAA going out of its way to aggressively enforce that? So it's this weird dichotomy where we're going to treat you like pilots, but not really. You're kind of this, you know, lower class kind of pilot citizen, if you will, in the eyes of the FAA, when it kind of highlights the dichotomy that's forming there. And it would be, at least a lot of people in the drone community would appreciate that they would equally start prosecuting these drones that have been shot down that have done nothing wrong. They've been flying lawfully under 107 or even under 101.
Well, it would strike me that most of these people probably are 101 flying there. It's just interesting, and I didn't realize that the sort of TFR they put up is the absolute most. What other TFRs then would be of this level? Is that a presidential TFR? What sort of
presidential and high-profile dignitary movement?
And is that the only category that this sort of TFR is in?
No, they can. Space ones, if you're like space shuttle is going to take off or something, or rockets, they do the same kind of procedure. It just basically bans almost any kind of air movement there.
And then how will it have been arrived at? Will it have been the local FAA office that's created this, or is it a head office that's created this?
It depends
that's on geographic location, really.
Because because you can have the local regional center call it in. You can have DC can call it in. So there are multiple ways to do it. Depends on what you want to do, how quickly you need to do it. You know, like Gene's familiar with calling in, you know, an ECOA, for instance, to do type of operations. Some of those same guys in the DC office are the ones that also do the TFR, so you can do it all in one shot. So that's convenient for the public sector, you know, the first responders and stuff like that. But there's 8 actual types of TFRs, and they all have different purposes. So, you know, disaster, then there's disaster in Hawaii, you have presidential, you have security, which is 99.7. There's at least, you know, there's the one that randomly floats around, and then there's also the FDC one under that, which is a notice that that was put out via notice to airmen. And that was done a little bit after, I believe, 9/11, and that applies to certain sporting events. And keep in mind, that's a completely separate TFR from the sporting event TFR, which gets people kind of confused. There's a 91.145 TFR for sporting events, and then there's the 99.7 one that is applied as a security one to those TFRs. And what's the difference? The big one kind of thinking-wise is one is a criminal one. So if you bust the 99.7 one, you can actually be punished criminally for that if you intentionally flew into it. So it's a much more serious one. And that's sometimes they'll use that for when the president flies around. So president has his own TFR, but they apply the 99.7 one because it's just a much more serious in case they actually need to prosecute people. And they pay very, very close attention to it. And so now, you know, Trump, since he's elected, he's only about like 15 miles that way from my house. And so there's going to be a TFR constantly over there. And they do pay very, very close attention. There was one time when Obama was in town in South Florida, and when I was flight instructing some years back, he was when they do like around campaigning time, they'll have these like weird TFRs that'll kind of move every other day. to these really rich locations to get the cash, right, for these little banquets. And so we were just like right within the TFR, and so we didn't go in. We did not go flying that day. We were in the FBO, and this guy took off. And all of a sudden, a phone call comes in, and the manager picks up, chats with the person, and then hangs up. And so I believe there was the FBI, the Secret Service, was calling him, trying to find out if we knew who it was that took off from that airport only a couple minutes prior. So they do pay very, very close attention to what happens in the airspace for at least the 99.7 TFRs.
Do you think, bearing in mind your potential, your new president, do you think you might see a lot more TFRs popping up over things that are politically expedient, or, you know, a TFR is a big thing, isn't it? It should be something that's saved for when it's really needed, because if you abuse it, then people are going to, you know, if they start popping up for everything, then people are going to start ignoring them, or they're going to be less of a thing.
They ignore them anyway.
Do they? Okay.
Well, there was some study that just recently went around where I'm trying to remember who it was. Somebody mentioned that was it that Super Bowl? I think it was. They had no drones that busted the TFR, yet they ended up having like 2, I think, manned aircraft guys busted, and so they were kind of like saying it's actually worse. You know, the manned guys were busting it, and so that could become a problem if you do abuse it. To where people start asking the question like, hey, why was that getting done? And that kind of also ties back into the Taylor case with the where the FAA, if you will, started enforcing the restriction for not flying, if you will, in the SFRA unless you were completely compliant, you know, this special flight rules area around DC. So that starts raising the question, why are you guys doing this? And then you're going to get involved in some lawsuits. And then furthermore, just forgetting the lawsuit side of things, it causes people to not respect the rule of law. And I think that's the real downside to when you abuse the law, then people don't respect it. And then it ends up hurting the people who really need that in place, such as like, Gene going out and flying for disaster response. So like that 91-137A1, Gene might want to call that in at some time. And if Gene doesn't have that ability where people are respecting it, that hurts Gene and his ability to actually go out and save people's lives. So I think abusing the law is really, I mean, that's really bad when you abuse the law because it hurts people and potentially causes them to lose their life.
Well, we've spoken about this before, haven't we? It's getting out of the way for an ambulance and stuff like that, common courtesy and, you know, things that you grow up doing. I think if I was in America, I'd be worrying that I'd be seeing a lot of spurious TFRs popping up, and I think they're not starting well with this one that's currently happening over the Indian reservation, and it should be questioned as to why how it's happened and why it's happening, and whoever did it better have some good excuses when they're stood on the 13th floor for a meeting without any biscuits. In Australia, we jump back to Australia and the rules you've got there. They're fantastic, the new ones. What are as an aviator, as a fixed wing aviator there, Philip, what are your thoughts on your new regulations which have snuck through, having been under controversy recently?
Look, just as a disclaimer, I'm on a CASA committee on that as a subject matter expert. So just thought I'd put that disclaimer out there first before I give any opinions on the matter. Look, I like the rules. I think that overall they are good. I will agree that there's always room for improvement on any set of regulation that's in its first draft. There's always room for flexibility. The best bit about these regulations that I don't think many people have actually realised yet, there's a little line under nearly every single clause in it that says subject to CASA approval or something along the lines of that actually allows for nearly everything in the future to be flexible. And that's the most incredible bit about this regulation is they've just cut through a huge amount of red tape. They've allowed themselves the ability to close it down a little bit if necessary, but they've also allowed themselves the ability to open it up when new technologies come that actually serve to be useful. So things like, adding flight with ADS-B into controlled airspace and things like that. At the moment it's complex and there's a long process to do that, but the regulations actually allow for that to simplify without another 6 years worth of writing, because these current regulations were started nearly 6 years ago, the process to actually get them out. So yeah, quite a few of us were quite worried when there was a political push to knock them back. I do understand some of the reasons behind some of the people that have wanted to push them back, and it's not that their reasons were necessarily wrong, but there's actually flexibility in these regs to actually improve the areas that people are a little concerned about, while allowing other people just to get on with the job and go fly, do stuff that can be done without unneeded regulation.
And just so for anyone that doesn't realize, that means if you're flying in town or such areas less than 2 kilos, pretty much you can get on with it. And if you're on your own land, which is extraordinary, you can go, I think, up to 25 kilos.
Yeah, 25 kilos.
Yeah.
But that land has to be rural. Or remote. We're not talking about someone flying over their backyard, within 30 meters of their next door neighbor's place with a 25 kilogram copter. We're talking about someone on a farm, doing, using propeller or other things like that, and actually doing commercial work on their own farm. Yep.
Yeah, I know. I think you led the way in 2000, and I think Australia continues to lead the way. I've just noticed the time. We've been ranting on too long, and Bruce probably needs to go and find his shotgun and get ready to, just in case any pigeons are nearby. I'm sure we can develop some sort of app for that, can't we, Philip? Some sort of a thing for pigeon detection.
Look, a little bit of thermal camera imaging and the co-computer on the Pixhawk 2, I'm pretty sure we can take out some pigeons. So
funny enough, I was part of a thing at Shrivenham about 2009 where they showed us a detect, sense and avoid that was camera based, and they did have to turn that down because it was seeing birds lifting from fields 2 miles away, so they had to turn the sensitivity down on it. So many false positives. Look, Gene's got the radio in hand, so he's probably going to get called out any second. Guys, thanks very much for joining us this afternoon, evening, morning, wherever you are in the world. I hope we can all do it again soon, and I will bid you farewell and speak next week.
Good night, all.
Thank you.
Bye, guys.
See you later.
Bye, guys.
Bye.
Cheers. Thanks, guys. Bye.
Bye.
Bye.